ROI Safety Services. We are going to talk about violence in the workplace and the new Senate bill from California that is due to be implemented July 1st. Today is June 19th, and the video we're going to cover, or the PowerPoint we're going to cover, is called Violence in the Workplace, and it is mandatory that everybody go through this training. And I am going to go over what we go over when we do the training at our customer sites. This video is for those who were unable to make our on-site training and for others who just want to have an understanding of the new requirement. There is quite a few areas that are very clear on what to do, and a lot more areas that are just, we're just going to do our best to navigate through them. I think overall the program is fairly simple to implement if you're in a regular manufacturing environment, but if you're working in a grocery store, if you're a barista or a bartender or a truck driver, there's a lot of things that are very high risk in dealing with public and dealing with intoxicated, unhoused people, and other various types of industries that are a little sketchy. So we're doing our best as a consulting company to help our clients, and I'll go over the things that I have seen and that we need to be aware of. But again, it is a new program. It's still being developed, and not developed, but it's being, we're identifying areas that need to be addressed almost daily in terms of the risk to our employees. So that being said, I'm sure there's some stuff that we're going to find in the next few weeks that we would like to share with those of you who are hearing this. So keep in contact with me, and I'll keep everyone posted. So again, Jesse with ROI Safety Services, and here's the agenda. This training module is from Cal OSHA, majority of it is, and I'm just taking from Cal OSHA what they put into the public arena so that you guys can understand it. Even though it's pretty clear, there's some areas that I can probably help out a little bit with. So, and it is a requirement. You need a policy. There is definitions, and these are something that you need to pay close attention to. A written plan is the plan you can get from the Cal OSHA website. A lot of you have already received it from your insurance company, and I think they're trying to help you by giving you this template. I don't know if they're giving you some guidance. I have not heard anybody getting any guidance from their insurance company, but just like with all the other programs they give you, they being the insurance company, they're just templates. They're just templates, guys. They need to be site specific. So you need to read through them carefully. You need to put your name in there where it says your company. And where it says more insight or what do, you need to fill that out. You can't leave it blank. So these templates are helpful, but it's like 20% of the work. There is so much more work that needs to get done. And that's what we do, and we want to help you with that. So please make sure you guys get these templates and work through them. Okay, the next step is reporting in investigation procedures. That has to happen. You have to have clearly defined processes for this, for reporting a violent incident. Who's going to take the logs? Who's going to manage the logs? And then you need to have an interactive question and answer. This is similar to the sexual harassment training, where you needed to have an interaction with questions and answers, and that's something that needs to get done. And the best way to do it is a live training. That's what we've been doing. So every training that we've done has been live, interactive, whether it's on Zoom or Google Meet. It just needs to be live. And then that way you can get the feedback and respond. And then de-escalation strategies. And what do you do in emergency? Do you have any lockdown procedures? It's surprising that most of our companies do. Not necessarily in writing, but they respond like, yeah, I know exactly what to do if we ever have somebody who comes into our lobby or walks into our dock. And then how to de-escalate, how to talk down somebody. And that's not something that you're just going to pick up right away and be an expert at. So that takes some skill. And then post incident response, support, and resources. Now, this is a requirement. I do not know of any reasonable exemptions from this, because if you have 10 employees or less, I believe there is an exemption for that. But the other caveat is, well, do you deal with the public? And so that is something that I think most everybody does, who has less than 10, whether you're a truck driver or you have a vending machine, or not a vending machine, but maybe you have a well, maybe you do. Maybe you have a pop-up vending machine and you're dealing with the public or something like that. I haven't had any clients like that, but I have quite a few clients that do have less than 10, but they do, and they also deal with the public directly. A glass repair shop, various other small companies like that who have less than 10, you absolutely have to have this training. A machine shop, I have another one that has less than 10, and they deal with the public. Recycling company that has less than 10, and the public's always on their lot. So these are it's still applies to you. And that's a bummer, because a lot of us try to get out of these exemptions so we don't have to jump through these kinds of hoops. I think overall the program has added value. It's not an easy program to put in, but it's not a difficult one in at the same time. It doesn't take a lot of effort, but it takes a little bit of effort and some understanding by management. So you got to have a policy on workplace violence. You got to consider what kind of work you do, where you work, and the people you deal with. If you are working in a environment in downtown LA where there's a lot of unhoused people, you have to consider that. If you're working with money, you have to consider that being a very high risk. If you're driving a truck and you're dealing with other drivers that have road rage, that's a risk. How do we mitigate that? How do we avoid and train our employees to avoid that and not react, but respond? So the company is committed to prohibiting retaliation against those who themselves or whose family members report to the company or to law enforcement any act of violence, threat, or anything of that nature. So there can't be any sort of retaliation, and that needs to be made clear to everybody, and that's what we do during the training. Also, the definitions are really important here. So an emergency is an unanticipated circumstances that can be life-threatening or pose a risk that may lead to injury to employees or to other persons. Engineering controls is an aspect of a built space or device that removes a hazard from the workplace or creates a barrier between the employee and the hazard. A log, the violent incident log, and this is something that somebody in your organization must manage. Most often it will be the HR department, the EH&S person, or maybe your local plant manager. It doesn't matter who, just make sure it's the right person. Actually, it does matter. It should be somebody who has some sort of authority. The plan is required by Cal OSHA, and it's readily available. There's templates that you can get, but again, the template is only part of the process. I encourage you to follow through the entire program and make it yours and make it site specific. And then a serious injury or illness. I like how they put illness in here. So we need to understand, what is an injury? What is an illness? I think we all are familiar with what happened during COVID. That was an illness. That was a work-related injury in some cases, because you got COVID on the job, right? So we could trace it back to, I don't know how we trace it back to who got it and who spread it, but it was part of the program. It's in here. So any injury or illness occurring in the workplace or employment or in connection with an employment that requires inpatient hospitalization. So this does have some overlap into the medical, but this is written for general industry. Diagnostic testing or any other employee suffers an amputation, the loss of an eye, or a serious degree of permanent disfigurement. So that's a serious injury. So pretty much anything under that is going to be an injury. And this is where it gets, where we get into the gray area, in my opinion. A threat of violence is any verbal or written statement, including but not limited to text, electronic message, social media messages, or other online posts, or any behavior or physical conduct that conveys an intent or that is reasonably perceived to convey an intent to cause physical harm or to place someone in fear of physical harm. I think this is going to be a little subjective here, and that serves no legitimate purpose. So this is what I was talking about. Violence in the workplace is any act of violence, threat, or violence that occurs in the working environment. Workplace practice control procedures and rules which are used to effectively reduce workplace violence. All right, so here's workplace violence includes but is not limited to the following: threat or use of physical force against an employee that results in or has a likelihood of resulting in an injury. Psychological trauma, there you go, a stress, regardless of whether the employee sustains an illness. An incident involving a threat or use of a firearm or other dangerous weapons, including the use of common objects as weapons, regardless of whether the employee sustains an injury. So you can see it getting a little more muddy, I guess. So we want to be really careful how we communicate this, and we do during the training. We want you to understand that if you feel threatened, if you feel your life is being threatened, we need to take action, get out of the area, report it to your manager. So it's really should be simple, but I can see there being some issues with understanding that. So types of workplace violence. Type 1, a workplace violence committed by a person who has no legitimate business at the work site and includes violent acts by anyone who enters the workplace or approaches workers with an intent to commit a crime. So this is type 1. There's actually 4 of them we're going to cover. So type 1, and here's some examples. So it could be a retail robbery, a workplaces where employees or proprietors have face-to-face contact with and exchange money with the public. So, any kind of convenience store, restaurant, I suppose. And then robberies of delivery and taxi cab, Lyft, threats or acts of violence directed by security guards, janitors, and other maintenance folks. So there's a few kind of examples that, we may not have an experience. Everybody I've done this training with so far has had some kind of experience with either type 1, 2, 3, or 4. So every one of these are pretty common. But none of our clients so far have had like tons of them. It's just one here and there over the years. And we had one who did have a fatality. We had one with a shooter. So these things do happen, unfortunately, often in some situations. So type 2, workplace violence directed at employees by customers. This is pretty common in some situations. So clients, patients, students, inmates, or visitors. And here's a list of examples. A teacher teaching administrative and support staff in schools where students have a history of violent behavior. You got a violent um, student. We offer classes in adult learning situations, so we have experienced aggressive behavior at times. Homeless shelters, if you're a nonprofit, or maybe you're working in an area where there are unhoused people. Maybe you're working in construction, and you have an incident with an unhoused person. Workplace or type 3 is workplace violence against an employee by a present or former employee or supervisor or manager. This is something that we've seen many times. This is something that I think most of us have gone through. An angry employee, maybe they got laid off. I don't know. Lots of different scenarios, but if this happens, report it immediately. Somebody gets fired, they want to return and act out in anger and do whatever. I've had employees or customers hire security guards after letting someone go who made a threat. They hired a security guard and notified the local police department. So that is something that will be part of your program. And then workplace violence committed in a workplace by a person who does not work there but has or is known to have had a personal relationship with an employee. And this is, I think everybody has gone through this in most situations where somebody comes to work and there's a scenario. Mark is enjoying his break in the outdoor break area. His former brother-in-law, angry over money, comes by and wants to collect, and so there's an issue. What do we do? Try to de-escalate, do our best to get the person out of there, and if you need to call 911, call 911. All right, so those are the 4 categories. There needs to be a written plan. The written plan is pretty simple, but it needs to be reviewed carefully and updated if you're using a template. Now, there needs to be an administrator, and there needs to be an evaluation of your hazards within your workplace. Employees must be part of this program, and this is where we get a small group of employees, and we can do multiple things with them. We can have a group come in and do an interactive meeting where we do a question and answer kind of a scenario and get some feedback from everybody. We use historical information that we have. We get the right various people from various departments. I like to use the safety committee to do that, but identifying what risk we have and then fixing those risks. But getting feedback from employees is key. Now, recognizing early warning signs of potential violence and promptly and accurately reporting them to your employees. So that's all part of the training, is recognizing that. And then reporting all threats of violence or incidents of workplace violence must be reported immediately to your supervisor. And if it's a serious risk, call 911. And then no employee will ever suffer retaliation or discrimination for reporting workplace violence. Okay, that will not happen. And then an investigation will occur, corrective measures will be taken, and we will interview witnesses, video cameras, historical records, and many other things that whatever each incident may produce. Hopefully, most of these incidents should be captured in video, and that makes things a little easier. So video cameras are very important. Keeping a log is extremely important. Have the log kept up to date, so anything that occurs gets reported to HR or whoever, and we keep that log current. We follow up on the log, and we report these incidents to our employees as necessary. Okay, as necessary. So interactive questions and answers is key. Obviously, we can't do that here because it's a pre-recorded, but if you guys are using this training as your in-house training, that's fine. But please make sure if you have any feedback that you give it to your supervisor, because we want to make sure that you understand if there are hazards you are experiencing, whether you're a truck driver, um, a gas station attendant, or a clerk at a in a warehouse. I don't know whatever you're doing, whatever role you have, if there's a hazard or you feel threatened in your work, you need to report it so we can mitigate these problems. Okay, it's very important you do that. So if you have an issue with, you may be working in a high risk gang area and you see gang members walking down the street and you feel threatened, you need to report that. There's things that we can do. We can put up security fences. We could put up cameras. If you have a delivery driver that is really difficult and has threatened you, report that to your supervisor. We can probably get rid of that particular delivery driver. These are just a few things. But de-escalation is really, really important. If you do find yourself with a situation that you are feeling threatened, let's say a truck driver is very irate with you and he wants to skip the line in deliveries or pickups and he's threatening you, please do not take it personally. And this is a big challenge for most of us, is taking things personally. Stay calm. Whatever that person is experiencing is their problem. They're just taking it out on you for whatever reason. It doesn't really matter. But your responsibility is to stay calm, listen, emphasize, be respectful, and use non threatening body language. Lower your voice. Do not take it personally. Offer options for the individual. Focus on the solution. Set clear boundaries and seek help if necessary. So it is good to prepare mentally for some of the scenarios that you may encounter on the job. I use the truck driver one because I have dealt with truck drivers that have been very upset because they were third in line and they have 10 pickups to do before the end of the day and it's the end of the day already. So I get that, but don't take it personally. If you can work with that person, it is a good idea. But if they start threatening you and you are feeling threatened, like you are getting a little nervous, please use good boundaries and respectfully have them leave the warehouse. And if they continue to move aggressively forward towards you, um, you could leave the warehouse or call 911 or call your supervisor or something like that is appropriate. And the same goes for unhoused and just really for anybody. Just stay calm. Do not react to whatever scenario it is. If you react, you're just going to add fuel to the fire and increase the chance of a violent act. So we do not want to do that. Okay, practice self-control. Now, if there is an emergency situation and you have an immediate threat, let's say somebody comes in your yard with a machete on Friday afternoon and they're swinging it around and not really swinging it at anybody, but they're just swinging it in the yard. Do you have a lockdown procedure? And that is something that everyone should consider. What do we do during a incident that is high risk and somebody's acting crazy out on the yard? Well, that is something that we all need to consider. Do we use a PA? Do we have an alarm system? Do we have an area in the building we can lock ourselves and keep safe, a safe room, and then call 911 immediately? So those are some things to consider. Do you have a PA system where you can code red in the yard or something, whatever terms you want to use, but that's something that we need to consider, is have a general lockdown. Same for gas stations with C-stores. If somebody goes in there acting irrationally, do you have an automatic lock on the front door? I think most of you guys do who work in those kinds of stores, or call 911. Those types of things need to be implemented immediately. So during an incident, safety is our priority, but after the incident, we want to evacuate the area, secure the area, obtain any medical aid if we need it, call 911, and then notify your supervisor. And then a report will be generated. An investigation will occur. If law enforcement's there, we need to notify them. If it's a injury involved and it is a recordable or a amputation, or if it falls under those kinds of injuries, we need to notify OSHA. And it's basically it. There's some actions that need to get done, but a lot of these common sense activities should be in place. If not, maybe you need to add a few things. Like most clients have cameras, and if there's anything, we have too many cameras in some of our locations. But cameras, I like the idea of having emergency locks where you can lock a door remotely, having a safe zone or a safe area, an automatic gate, well lit areas. I don't have any clients that don't have any well lit areas, so those are just a few things that we can look at. And then understanding people's behaviors, and if you feel threatened, go to your supervisor and let them know what's going on. All right, well, this concludes our training. So this really is kind of an overview of workplace violence. And there will be some site-specific things that your site needs to be trained on. For example, if you have a safe room, or how to activate your automatic lock system or your alarm system. But I advise each of you to take a look at your location, do a good walkthrough, a thorough walkthrough of your entire interior and exterior of your property. Look for lighting, cameras, doors. Make sure your doors can lock, gates, maybe even security razor wire. Look for things like that. I'd even consider looking for wild animals and coyotes. I mean, you never know. People work in some strange areas. Maybe if you're delivering fuel to a cabin, and there are known risks up there for mountain lions and bears. That's a risk. So what kind of safety measures are you putting in place? So those are just a few items to consider. I hope this helps, and you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you. Oh, by the way, one last thing. Report all of your incidents to your supervisor. That's the key takeaway. Any sort of workplace violence, please report that to your supervisor. Thank you.